John, how long have you had this current loft?
Oh, this loft has been up for 30 years, Ray. It's served its purpose very well, so I don't want to change it very much. It's a well-ventilated loft. In the racing section in the middle, there's ventilation both at the top and bottom. In the old language, 12 inches right along the top and 9 inches along the bottom. And in the front of the loft, because it faces northwest, it's also open, but I have a flap up the top that I can bring down if there's a thunderstorm or it's raining from a northwest direction. Otherwise, the wind and the rain and the sunlight come in, and I look at it this way, Ray, they're all free and there's nothing better than fresh air and sunlight.
And you've had it in exactly the same shape without making too many alterations to it for the entire 30 years?
Yes, I have made a couple of little alterations inside, only to do with the grit boxes I used to have. I've done away with them and got some plastic containers now, but basically over the years, as it is now, it's been the same way for at least 20 years.
What sort of a floor do you have?
It's a red brick floor, which is just all put in together, and then I have a grit topping over the top of it. I'd prefer to have a wooden floor, but I don't want to change things at the moment. I think I'll just leave it as it is.
How often do you clean it, John?
In the summer season, at this time of the year, once a week. In the racing season, I clean it every day.
I understand you've got a rather unusual method of cleaning the grit on the floor. You like to use it over and over again, but you're fastidious about cleaning it and keeping the manure out.
Yeah, I do, Ray. With the system I got, I end up underneath the shell grit that I use having what I call powdered droppings. These powdered droppings I get rid of 3 times a year, once after the moult, in the middle of the season just before the association races are on, and then I do it again at the end of the season before the breeding season starts. And what I do, I put the whole loft floor through a fly wire sieve to get all the dust out. And to make sure all the dust is out, I use a vacuum cleaner to clean it all out.
Is there anything about the loft that you would change if you built it again?
I'd have the floor raised off the ground, Ray, probably 2 to 3 feet with a wooden floor. Otherwise, everything seems to work pretty well, and if the birds are happy and the results are coming from the loft in its present shape or whatever, I think the environment is pleasing to the birds, so I think I would just leave it.
You've got normal box perches. Do the cocks and hens race separately to different sections?
Yes, they do. In the centre section and the 2 down the far end, I convert during the racing season for the hens. But if I have more cock birds than I usually do hens, then the centre section and the one just to the right of centre, I have the racing cock birds in.
What about breaking in of youngsters? John, what method do you use for breaking your babies in?
Well, we're in that stage at the moment, Ray, and there's a few birds up the top in the lookout cage. They sit there during the day and see what goes on around the yard and birds flying over and other things, and they learn not to get spooked. And what I tend to do is let the birds out every afternoon for an hour or an hour and a half and then get them in.
What method of trapping do you use?
Yeah, Ray, I used to have the old Yankee type trap, but the birds got a little bit too cunning for it and they wouldn't go in, so all I did was lift the bob wires up, and I now just have an open section that the birds go in through the divisions of the Yankee trap inside the loft, and then I catch them inside.
You found that that's better than the Yankee trap? Do you lose any time catching them? Do they get spooked?
Well, I look at time lost in the loft, Ray. Firstly, you've got to get the birds home, and if I get birds home in the first batch every week, well, I'm going to get my association points and win a lot of races. So I think if you get them home, the trapping is only secondary, but the important thing when they do come home is they go in quick.
Do you use any trapping birds? Have you got a bird as a decoy to get them down?
No, I've got no call bird whatsoever. I did have them years ago, but I don't use any call birds anymore.
And what's the reason for that?
Well, quite often my birds come and they go in so quick that I wouldn't have time to throw a call bird up.
John, a lot of the old timers say that the breeding season where the winners are won. This is where the races are won, in the breeding section right now, early in the season.
Yes, Ray, that's very true, you know, because it's what you feed your birds now as to what sort of feathers they'll have and what sort of bodies they'll have for the hard competitive season that's going to come later on. If we just have a look down here, for instance, we're in one of the breeding cages now, and I'll show you what I feed my birds. This is some of the feeding that I've got for my birds that's here for them all the time. Is I top it up every morning and night. I've got some tick beans in here for them to eat, and I've got my new season's peas which I've got for them also to pick over all the time and have a pick at. Also in the loft all the time is the grit. I mix my own grit, and this is the mixture. I get 3 different types, one from the local fodder store, one that I get myself, which are the shells, and the other one comes from Broken Hill. But they need real good shell grit to grind their food up and make their eggs and those sorts of things. So it's important to have good grit at all time in the loft.
What's the significance of having new season's peas?
Well, I believe that the new season's peas, Ray, are more nutritious than old 2, 3 or 4-year-old peas that have, you know, had their days and gone hard and crisp or whatever, whereas these are fairly new, and I believe they're more nutritious. And in nature, birds breed to the seasons, that when food is plentiful, they breed their young so that the food is available to feed their young. And I believe in pigeons that birds should also breed to feed their young the new season's grain that's grown at the time. So that's why I like it.
You're in step with nature. What about the tick beans? Do they readily eat the tick beans?
When I put a handful of tick beans in here fresh, new, the newer ones, as soon as I put them in there, they'll pick up those tick beans in preference to anything else. I also feed them at the same time, Ray, in a tray that I lay across the floor here. I give them one of my hands full of some small seed, 11 varieties of small seed, and they get that in the morning at night, just as an additional little sort of ice cream or whatever to give them some extra incentive to feed their young.
So we've had a look at what the older pigeons are fed on during the breeding season. What about the babies when they're weaned, John?
Wean them on exactly the same food. I feed them in the morning what they want in a tray, and when they're finished, take it away. And the same when I let them out for their exercise in the afternoon. When I'm ready to get them in, I get them in, feed them the peas in a tray with a little bit of small seed as an extra mixture, and when they're finished I take it away. I do not leave feed in the loft for the baby.